All right, so we're now resuming our retreat from earlier this morning, and we were going to propose rule changes. So, Kathleen?
Yes, so just a quick closure on the one that we chatted about before we took a break, and this is regarding attending meetings like neighborhood meetings outside of council districts. So I am going to write some sort of process for council to do that. I also just wanted to make sure council knows that we can't tell the neighborhoods any rules. So this is really about how council is going to determine any action, because they have their own bylaws and rules that they do, so the county doesn't have that ability. Okay, so under two.
Chair,
go ahead.
Could you just recap briefly, since I missed this morning, what was decided? Maybe it can't be done.
We had discussion of the one that we did decide to move forward on, that Kathleen said she would draft a rule on. The other was recording of our legislative updates, and there was not support for that.
And Councilor Marshall, just so you know, we have not hit on the number 1 on this item. We started with number 2, so we only talked about 2A and 2B this morning. So we're going to do the rest of them now.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay, so the next one under other counselor meetings and correspondence, the topic is counselors meeting, responding, et cetera, to constituents that are outside of their counselor district.
So is there some explanation for this? I mean, I will say that since I've been a counselor, anyone that's reached out to me, I have responded. If they've reached out to me directly, especially if it was in some other counselor's district, I universally copied that counselor or invited them to any meetings that we may be scheduling. So who asked this or who proposed this? What's the issue here?
Counselor Belcott, you're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. Chair, I was the one who brought this up because I was not courtesy copied or included on issues that had to do with my district with other counselors being involved. I would just like to have a courtesy copy. So if we could just include something along the lines of saying, you know, including or courtesy, however you want to say it, so that counselor in that district knows what's happening. Because there's been a few times where I did not know until after the fact. And then that constituent moved the issue to a higher level to the county manager or to a director in a different county department.
You know, I totally agree with that, Michelle, but I think we added that to 2B, didn't we? Where the counselor whose district it is would be notified.
Was that so? Yeah, just not. I guess we could, because that's the specificity is the neighborhood meetings. So yeah, if we could just, we don't have to say specifically to the neighborhood meetings, whatever language that would just cover that issue.
Yeah, the AG in 2B could perhaps be written out to, for example, neighborhood meetings, or just
Agreed.
left out. Either one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing to also consider, there's different ways that constituents contact the county. So if they contact a counselor directly and then a counselor forwards that to me to do follow-up, I'm not looking to see what district they're in. So, I mean, even in Counselor Belcott's example, I looked at it as it progressed just because her and I have had this discussion and finding out it was in her district. So what I do is I quickly send it off to whoever has the answer to keep that process going. Same thing with the online, I think, communication, because there's sometimes that people will click, you know, email your counselor and it goes through that portal. I don't see those. Or send it to all the counselors. And so then we have maybe one or two counselors responding directly to that constituent, and a third one emails me, and so there is a little, and we're not checking that either, and I don't see those unless they're forwarded to me, but we're not, staff, we haven't been looking up everybody's address to see what district they're in unless there's a question that comes up. So I just wanted to make sure you all were aware of that.
So to me, this sounds like an area where we should put a little flesh on the bone because, and it does carry forward the spirit of our charter as well. And I will admit that, I always will try to copy another counselor, no matter what it is. Before I was the chair, I always copied the chair. Or now that I am the chair, I'm copying the vice chair. Unless I know it's going to be a meeting or some further action, and I know it's in someone else's district, then I will copy that counselor instead. So I agree we should put some of this in writing to better define how this should be handled. And as the chair by charter, I'm responsible for constituent responses, and this has been a challenge always. We've been bringing that issue up from time to time, year after year. At one point, we almost hired a different web page provider, a consultant basically, to have an automated response. Kristen and others have responded. Linnea, way back when, used to pretty much respond to all the constituents if they needed to be simply directed to the right department. Staff would do that. So I think it's time to look at that again and write a rule about this. So I agree with, in spirit with this.
Yeah, well, we can take a look at that because I know we looked at a business process before because I can tell you when I'm not with you, I'm responding to you because of the emails and that, we want to make sure we're being as efficient with all of our time. And I know Kristen's been helping out a lot too. So we'll get something drafted for your review.
And our charter really requires this as well when a constituent has a complaint about code enforcement or permitting. And I'm assuming every counselor is doing this, those should immediately go right to the county manager for action. And then basically we say, tell me what's going on here, or do some follow-up for us in case there is a code issue or something else, policy issue that would be within our purview. So are we on track? We'll go ahead and take a stab at writing a rule.
I would just add that I don't always know exactly where someone is coming from and they have an issue. And sometimes there are issues that kind of overlap counselor districts. And it may be from a constituent's point of view, they just want to talk to certain among us. They may not want to involve, they may just be looking for three supportive for whatever it might be. And, they would have to communicate that, I suppose.
So I don't know. I'm not sure where I would like to go with this because, to be honest with you, when I get an email from a constituent, the last thing I pay attention to is their address because they're a constituent of the county. And my goal is to make sure that they get taken care of, whatever it is that they're asking for. What I see kind of on display here is what I consider a drawback of having districted elections is it kind of becomes this turf thing. This is my turf, this is your turf, you stay on your turf. I don't think that's productive for team playing. I'm more than happy to, whenever it's appropriate, to forward it to, the counselor that belongs to that district. But there's also times when, I don't know where you set the rules on this because for example, if there's certain priorities that we have and somebody happens to live in somebody else's district, are we supposed to let that counselor know that we're speaking with that person? Or, how far does this go?
Yeah, I think you've just highlighted why we need a rule.
Counselor
So,
Young, I door knocked in my precinct, all 60 plus of them. I didn't door knock in your precinct. My constituents are my constituents. I am territorial. I'm sorry, but I did a lot of work when I campaigned, and my people count on me to respond.
So this may take a while to get a rule that we all agree on or that a majority agrees on, but I think it's important to respect the other counselors and those voters that voted for them. And yeah, so I think I have always, if someone asked me for help, I didn't ask them what party they belonged to. I didn't ask them where they came from. But if I was then setting meetings with staff, giving substantive answers back, and it was in someone else's district, I always included that I was respectful of the other counselor from wherever that constituent came from. So I think we need to take a stab at better aligning this. So you have a better feel, because it sounds like you do have different ideas of your responsibilities to someone else's constituent. So
Right.
anyway,
From my
we'll-
perspective,
go ahead,
being-
Sue.
being largely the rural district, I welcome the involvement of other counselors, because I think there's certain things one can better understand by getting involved. So I don't know. I think it's good to know, good to know what's going on in your district. And I think that courtesy copy where you're able to do that would be helpful. But I don't know. It hasn't been an issue for me personally.
I'd like to request a favor of staff. I really don't know when constituents write us, if they're not in District 3, what district they are in. And so I am not sure which counselor I should be copying.
Yeah.
And I can promise you that the constituent isn't going to tell me, hey, I'm in District 2 or whatever, because that would be 1 out of 1,000 that would even know. You know, that's not a part of their frame of reference. Like you were saying, Sue, they're just reaching out for some help, typically from someone that maybe they know that counselor's name or saw them on TV or whatever. So anyway, I would appreciate your help on that. How do I find out their proper district number?
Are you asking for us to check it? Because if I were to check it, this is what I would do. When you have the form that comes in from online, they actually put their address. You plug that into the Property Information Center, which is a link on our main page, and it actually says the counselor district.
Property.
That's exactly what I do.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's pending that they actually put their address in there. Many times when it's been forwarded to me, I can see the address, but that,
Yeah.
So
Sometimes
one
they
of my
give
thoughts.
intersections.
One of my thoughts on this is perhaps we look at maybe changing the format on that a little bit to where it actually determines the district rep, and that when you go to the email your counselor function, it only goes to their district rep, but that obviously they can still send an email directly to any one of us.
So, and I have a question that's somewhat related. If someone sends a message to all of us, does that person automatically get an answer from somebody? That's the role that, Linnea had filled in. I think you have been filling in, Kristen. I want to ensure that it's happening every time, because every constituent deserves an answer.
Yes, and what I have been doing, and I'm more than happy to change this, of course, but emails and questions that need to directly go to a department or are about a specific issue, I do forward those on, and a lot of times I'll communicate with Kathleen. Has this been sent on? Have you heard of this problem before? The ones that are just opinions or direct questions of counselors, I see that you received them, and those are ones I don't have a department, or I don't have a solution for them. It's more them communicating with you. Those ones I have not been responding to, but any questions, I do my best to get the constituents' answers.
I'm
Just-
sorry to bother you again on this, but what is the name of the link where we find out what district various people live in? I'm on the webpage now.
Okay, so if you are on the web page, if you go under Find It Fast on the far right side, it's the second link from the bottom on that list called Property Information Center.
Find it fast.
It's,
Where is
Kristen, you
it?
can share your screen. Kristen's going to share her screen and show you.
Okay.
Sometimes that's easier. You guys scroll down just a little bit. There you go, right there. On the right side towards the bottom, did you see the link, Councilor Bowerman?
I'm looking for Kristen's page or her community.
Yeah,
Is
so
it
it's on,
email?
it should be, yeah, she's sharing her screen right now. So if you look at the meeting where you can see us, you should be able to see the website now.
The meeting?
Did you lose us?
No,
Scroll
I
down on-
see you too. Find us fast. Oh, find it fast. I see that. And property information center?
Information Center, yes.
Oh,
So if you click on that, and then there you can search by the owner name, the street address. So, Kristen, if you just want to find one, we can show where it is on the Property Information
brilliant.
Center.
This is, I didn't realize. I suppose everybody but me knew about this, but I didn't know.
Yeah, so, and go ahead, Kristen, hit the search button. And then on here, you can actually see in the center, it says Electoral Data, Board of County Councilors District. It says 1. So we can see that, and this is our building downtown. And then you can see the other districts, outside of the council.
That is wonderful.
It's a wealth of information.
It is. There's all kinds of stuff on that page.
Your property
Okay.
You
tax
can spy
breakdown.
on your neighbors and look at all of what school district, what
It is,
the property costs, when it was sold, what permits were brought up.
yeah.
All kinds of great information there.
That's on another page too, but this is find it fast.
I just have one more comment because
ahead.
I think for the residents of Clark County, they may or may not want their communication shared with others. And if something comes in addressed specifically to me, I guess I don't feel an obligation to share that because they're communicating directly with me. I don't know. This I guess makes me nervous.
Yeah, so it is, unless they're a lawyer and you're talking to them about a legal issue, it's not privileged, and someone makes a request for that communication, it's public record.
Right. Oh, I'm very aware of that.
Okay.
I think she's referring, like, if it's somebody outside your district who messages you specifically. Is that right, Councilor Marshall, that you?
That's correct. And I think the railroad is a prime example of that. People communicate with me and, it's an issue that crosses several districts.
So
So
I'm hopeful
And there-
that you're
and there
giving
could
them
be
accurate
issues we-
information.
absolutely.
Okay. All right, we need to move on because we have a lot of rules to go through. So we'll work on that one and probably have a lot of discussion when we review the proposed rule.
Yeah, and I don't think the next one we need any further discussion unless you want a change, or we can solidify this in the rules of procedure. This is when counselors are attending outside board meetings that are assigned to another counselor. So this is like if somebody's on RTC or somebody's on ECHO, and we already have that process in place that if you're going to be attending another board meeting that you're not assigned to when you do your board assignments, to let Krista know to make sure we don't have a quorum. So if that is still working for everybody, we can solidify that in the rules of procedure just to, if it helps with any future discussion on that? Any changes?
We've certainly talked about this
Yeah.
somewhat ad nauseum. Any objection? It should be a rule. And certainly, just a reminder, if you're on a primary and you can't make it, make sure the alternate knows or somebody, or the manager knows that you can't make it.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so going back up to the first, let's go back up to the first one since we're going to finish on one. This is on counselor meetings, your regular meetings, Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And I did have one at the end here. Okay, so the first item is the council meeting agenda order. And this is regarding like public comment, public hearing, like what order do you want? And I also want to add that I did not include on here is adding 2 items to the agendas. The first one being a roll call of council, because I don't want to have to interrupt the chair as we're starting up, or to make sure that we're clearly articulating the absences, and also amendments to the agenda, just to have that as a 2 top agenda items, just so that we have that clear and move forward. So this is already defined in the rules of procedure in section 7. So is there any desire to change the order that we currently do those meetings in?
So I'm happy to start, and I'm not sure if we address it elsewhere. I think the first primary question that we dealt with a few years ago made a change. We just recently added additional meetings because they were getting so long. But we didn't always have alternating evening and morning meetings. And some constituents complained about having only evening meetings because they had dinner and other commitments, or they worked in the evening. So we kind of split the baby in half and had morning meetings as well. We've gotten recent comments about, hey, I work, I can't go in the morning. Do we want to deviate from that? I think that's the first question I would ask. Or do we stick with the kind of the balance of having some meetings in the evening and some in the morning on Tuesday? Is there any desire to change that?
I have a thought on this, and it could be that, I don't know, if it seems as though more people are able to attend in the evening, we might make an effort to schedule those things that are, would attract a larger crowd to those evening meetings if it is assumed that more people would be able to get there. So it could, because I think it depends on the topics. If something is a big item is scheduled during the day and people can't get there. So I don't know if this could be nuanced in some way. It does make sense to me to have a little of both.
This one's pretty tough because I just want to be able to get the most people to be able to be involved as possible, but I also don't want to exclude anyone. So like if we did them all in the evening, I think we probably would get the most people possible, but if we don't have anything during the day, then we completely exclude people that are only available during the day. So I don't know there's no perfect answer to this, because either way you go, you're excluding somebody.
And that's the exact conversation we had previously, and that's why we kind of split it up. I mean, I prefer to keep that portion the same as far as scheduling, but I do recommend, because we had some input from different organizations that actually collaborated on some changes that on how we schedule each agenda. And I'm in favor of talking about that and whether or not you want to do it. So my summary of the first thing I do is simplify public comments. And I would want to join a public testimony on consent, separate business, and general public comments together. One opportunity in the beginning of the meeting. The nuance to that, because we all know that when we have a public hearing, it is kind of its own hearing with its own public comment. Some of what I've heard or read, you know, I could see that, and we've had confusion in the past where people start talking in the wrong public comment session, that we allow even people to speak during that one public comment period on later public hearings, especially if they don't want to come back, they don't want to wait. The issue there is the public record. And I think we just need to tweak the instructions and say, if you speak on a public hearing during open public comment, it will not be part of that record unless you've submitted written comments for that public hearing. So I'm looking to simplify this and have less opportunities during a single agenda for public comment. I think there will be some real benefits in simplifying it and only having one period, aside from the separate hearings. Obviously, they're always going to have their own public comment.
Well, that's a different subject, I think, than where we were on day or night meetings. And I've gotten feedback from some individuals who had liked to come at night just because they thought it was easier on their family life or whatever, who say now, I don't want to come downtown at night because of the danger. So there are a variety of reasons now why people may choose day versus night, and it's not all just work related. So I would suggest, as a result of those kinds of discussions we've all had, to keep it the way it is and just alternate and have both available. And we could have it, like Sue, like you were saying, depending on the issue, or maybe not, just alternate it just according to whatever comes up on the agenda. So that would be my suggestion on that. And then
Thank you, Karen. I actually had moved on from that because I thought we had agreed to keep it the way it was. I think we have 3 people supporting just keeping the evening morning split as is. So I was basically moving on to adjusting the agendas themselves, because what the primary complaint was, we wait hours, take the public comment and up front. So that's what I was going to propose. So like I'm looking at an agenda here from yesterday, you know, Tuesday, February 6th. You put the date first, the time, Pledge of Allegiance, invocation. That doesn't change. But when you get to the consent agenda and separate business items, we could move that to the end so that we have our public hearings first. And we could also move the public comment period before then. And I was suggesting that we could consolidate that a bit and open it up for all public comment, with the one caveat that if you talk on a hearing at general public comment, it is not part of that record unless you've submitted a written comment. So that's what I'm teeing up here.
Yes, so I would definitely be supportive of moving the public hearings to the beginning of the meeting. That, you know, there's much less participation for agenda items, you know, for consent and separate business as there is for public hearings. So being able to create that certainty that their public hearing starts at the beginning, I think is good. And also from, I think, the same feedback that you're referring to, actually prioritizing, you know, which meeting would have more interest to be at the first as well. You know, first, if you have 2 public hearings, one that we know there's probably going to be lots of participation, trying to schedule that one first. And I think, you know, everybody knows I'm a huge advocate of public participation, but I think a good compromise would be to combine open public comment with consent and separate business so that there's one time. It's extremely rare, in my opinion, to have somebody that gives us good, informative information on two different testimonies. So I would be supportive of condensing that, and I'm interested in your suggestion of allowing, with your language that it won't be included in the public record, but I'm not quite sure what the consequences of that would be.
And I think what you proposed, though, if council agreed doing public hearings first, it will be a non-issue. It would be only if the public hearing remains at the end and we do all the other public comment up here. If they decide to comment on that, it won't be part of the record. But if the hearing's first, it will be a non-issue because it'll happen before the general public comment and on separate business consent. So it might make more sense when I get it lined out.
Testimony a day or two ago that she would like to see the public comment and that whole period there, if combined or not, to be nearer the end of the meeting than at the very beginning. And her reason was that sometimes she learns more about the issues as we go through the agenda, as we go through the meeting. And I hadn't really thought about that before, but I can understand that. And as a consequence, I support her thought process there, that the public comment and so on being closer to the end of the agenda.
Right. I'd like to make a couple comments. I agree with the direction this is going as far as having, combining the open public comment with the specific comment on the consent agenda. So that would be good. I think, though, I took note of that comment about having at the end. The trouble with having it at the end is we could have already taken action on any particular item,
Yeah.
and then that public comment would be moot at that time. But I would like that for an official public hearing, that all of the comments be confined to that public hearing rather than the open public comment period. And I agree that if we have the public hearings up front, some of this will take care of itself.
Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up. So I think that does solve the issue, because it starts to get hyper-technical if you say, well, you're going to make public comment now, but it's not during the hearing. But if we do the public hearing first, it eliminates that issue.
So not to throw more into this, but you know how like today, we have council time and it starts at 1 and our workshops start, and sometimes we have a block of time in between. Sometimes we're running up against the other meeting like today. So my question is, should we consider doing that for Tuesday? Because I love this idea of putting the public hearings at the beginning, but when we have consent and separate business later, is that going to mean that we have department heads sitting out here for 2 hours waiting for that to happen?
Yes, but on a Tuesday, I mean, we're talking about the Tuesday agenda now.
Right.
And and I know I've heard counselors say this, whatever you do, somebody's not going to be happy with it. But, so if we change it to public hearing up front, yes, staff, but I mean, they can watch on their computer and log on and work or come up when we're getting closer to that agenda item. So staff can be a little bit more flexible with that, but.
Would it be better if we mimicked what we've done on Wednesday and have a scheduled time for the consent and separate business to start?
Because it's the times identified for Wednesday are our start times. We have the start time already identified for our Tuesday meetings.
So they can't, because they're the same meeting essentially is what you're saying, or?
Well, I don't know if we want to be, and I'm just thinking through this because I haven't thought about that before, but I don't know if we want to be that restrictive that, like executive session today, we were done early. So if you get, like, public hearings will be from this time to this time, and then separate, the regular meeting, is that what you're thinking would start at another time? There's so much volatility with the hearings and how long it takes and how short it takes that, I can look at it and see if we can split it, but
Well, it's more along my thought. So, I mean, if you think that it's better for staff just not to do that, then that was my only concern, was I was thinking about staff. So,
Well, yeah, so, during the day, they're here and they're working, so they can watch online and join. At night, we're going to have all the staff waiting around all night until the hearings are done.
okay.
So, I mean, that's, I think, the bigger impact for them is at night.
So what I suggest, because I heard some general consensus about consolidating the public comment, having the separate, or the public hearings up front, moving other things to the back. Maybe we could have a sample,
Yeah.
just have it drafted up that way, and then we could take a look at it and say, looks good.
Yes.
And keeping the schedule between evening and morning the same. I heard another comment, and I've seen it written too, that, hey, you want to prioritize those that are popular. I don't know how you do that. I would leave it up to the county manager to determine, but I will tell you that, probably the biggest surprises we had on filling the room were on issues that weren't on the agenda at all. But that doesn't happen very often.
Okay.
Are we good to move forward? I think we've had good discussion. We'll try something new.
The only other thing in this, I don't think is identified in the rules of procedure, but I'm assuming that we're going to continue with our extra council meeting that we added last year, and also continue with the placeholder on the Tuesday afternoons in the event that we need it. Like next week has been canceled, so we're going to continue that practice.
Any objection to that? Because I think it's been working.
It's good.
I think it's been working, and I like the way we do our Wednesdays as well with the work sessions in the morning. I think that's been very good.
I do too.
I do too.
Got it.
Perfect. And I'm getting regular meals, which makes me happy.
Do you want me to put that on the agenda?
Yeah.
Like lunch. Okay. So C, so this is defining counselor communications. So on Tuesday meetings, there is a counselor communication area, and on Wednesday, there's counselor reports. So there was a question about, do we need to define what that means and what counselors should be reporting out on?
So I had put that in there only because of the one instance that we ran into where someone started bringing up during counselor communication something that was outside of the meeting, really had nothing to do with the meeting. It was just a revisiting of something we had already voted on. And then I went back to, and that had never happened before. And then I went back to our charter and went back to our rules of procedure and realized there's nothing in there that defines any of this as far as what's a counselor report. So I don't know that we need to do it. I just suggested it, that we take a look at it if we wanted to define what that portion of the agenda really covers, so that every counselor knows what we're aiming at. I mean, I think as Chair Bowerman, she was really trying to achieve making sure we had reports from all the boards and committees that all of us were seated on, because things would be happening, we'd never hear about it, but yet we had a counselor that was responsible for attending, but never briefing us during counselor reports. So anyway, what do you all think?
I think we should make a stab at it. I think definition is good. When things get confusing because there's nothing in writing, I think that's where we run into problems.
Well, Kristen can provide a list to you, Gary, that says during this last week, there were these meetings that occurred, and here's our liaison to that committee. So it's easy for you as chair to follow up by individual with the counselor if by chance they don't volunteer their what they got out of that meeting that they attended. But I think there's a lot of value in that, because otherwise, why go to all of these meetings if it isn't passed on to the rest of the council and therefore the public?
I have a couple
So-
comments.
Go ahead, Sue.
Thank you. I was glad to see this because it's been confusing to me what to report on when. And if the reports become reporting on our board and committee assignments, that would make sense. And I don't know exactly how to define board council communications. So some clarity on that would be helpful for me. And there are times when there's really nothing particularly newsworthy on some of these boards and commissions, or they may not meet. But I think if we're advised that this is the time we need to report on that and leave it to the discretion of the counselor, what is kind of newsworthy to report, that I would appreciate that.
So, and I think there's nothing wrong with ever saying nothing significant to report after a mundane meeting. But I want to add something related to this. So when is it, if any one of us wants to put something in front of the counselor publicly, so we're not violating open meetings law, is it during council report or some other time to get an issue before all of us that we may individually want to pursue, but we can't communicate serially or otherwise with more than one other
Yeah, and
counselor? So that's the other flip side of this.
yeah, and there is language in the rules of procedure that says that a counselor with the support of one other counselor can put an agenda item on a meeting, and they have to notify the chair.
Okay, so that's a good reminder of that.
And I would ask that you copy me since I put it on the agenda.
Okay, are we ready to move on to the next
Just
topic?
one other comment here. What I'm not a fan of, and maybe the rest of you are, but I'm not, is under counselor communication for a counselor to say, oh, well, I met this week with the mayor of Timbuktu, and that person had a great idea. And then they go on and on about that individual meeting that doesn't really pertain to council as a whole. And I find that pretty much useless. And I'd rather we not have that type of communication.
Well, I know I've done that in the past only because I thought the rest of the counselors should know and would be interested in it in pursuing our policy agendas. But we could
It's usually
just
again,
harken back to what Kathleen said about putting it on as if it's important enough to talk about, to put it on as an agenda item.
And I've always just made the assumption that our comments always would have to be, and this was just an assumption, related to any of the boards or committees that we were on that affected the council. So, but like you mentioned, Chair, some of the meetings don't really, they're short, there's no results, so there's nothing to report sometimes from all of us.
So I do think that we should work on defining what the difference is between council report or council communications and council report, just to clarify. And to be honest with you, I really don't think that there's anything I've ever heard at this dais that I think is useless. So if, in my opinion, if a counselor feels like it's something worthy for the body to hear, I want to hear it.
So let me ask this question. With the counselor communications, which is on the Tuesday agendas, and then we have council reports on Wednesday, do you want to keep both?
no.
I mean, because there's the weeks that you have a Tuesday meeting, now you have two meetings back to back with that. And if there's no distinction or definition that's going to make them different on that communication, do you want to remove them from one of your agendas?
I think one's enough. Karen, you were going to say something?
I totally agree, and I'd like to see counselor communication be the one that is removed. The counselor reports be so valuable.
Okay, so the counselor communications on a Tuesday meeting, we can remove that from the agenda and then just have counselor reports on Wednesday.
And everyone will focus, if so there's something that you've done in a meeting with someone else, you'll just put an item on an agenda, at the next available agenda.
I don't mind if a counselor brings up some brief item or some, this is going to happen in the community that is not strictly a committee or a board report. And it may not be really worthy of an agenda item. So I'd like to see just some flexibility on this, but I would be okay with removing the council communication on Tuesday. I think the council meetings can be so jam-packed. Often I'm just happy to just keep adjourn the meeting and not spend a lot of time on after a long agenda.
And I think that's a good point by Councilor Marshall as well. Sometimes things happen in the news. It would be untimely for an agenda item, but it's newsworthy and you may want to comment on it as long as it's not overly political or contentious, and we used to have that. Sometimes one councilor would bring up something that, oh my gosh, now I've got to respond to that because it sends the wrong message, or I totally disagree with what one counselor said on newsworthy items. So anyway, let's take a stab at the additional definition and just be mindful of everyone's, I mean, not everything's important, and be mindful of everyone's time.
And the newsworthy items are going to go with reports on Wednesday. Is that correct?
Yes. I'll put some language, but what I have heard the consensus that one report, which should be on Wednesdays, not Tuesdays.
Yeah.
So I'll craft something for your guys, for your consideration. Okay. So the next one, I believe that concludes that discussion. So the next one is regarding the excused and unexcused absences and the criteria attached to them. So I know the council spent a lot of time last year updating this language. I do think that the roll call at the beginning will help, but I'll turn it over to council.
I'd like to talk about this. So I obviously I'm a sophomore now. And I was wondering where the language came from this. And the reason why I'm asking is there's been a couple of instances where I specifically have been unexcused. I'll give you an example. So in October, my youngest child had RSV, and I was not going to have him go to his pumpkin patch field trip because he was pretty sick, and then he got me sick. And then the weather was forecasted to be pretty rainy. That reversed. And I believe I gave a 3-day notification that I was then going to be out for the field trip. So per our rules and procedures, if it's a non-emergency, you have to give a 5-day notification. Most places where I've personally worked in the past, and I'm not sure about like say county employees, that they'd have to give a 5-day notification of being absent for something personal. Things changed. I think I had another incident where my husband's car broke down. I had to go pick him up. So I was just kind of wondering where this language came from, because I will say in my experience in the last year with being with all of you, I think we're all a pretty dedicated council. We go, for most of us, all of us actually go above and beyond and even go to meetings that we didn't have planned, or they're not our assigned boards and committees, like the ribbon cuttings or things on the weekends of that. So I'm just trying to understand where this language is coming from. And I know there was a lot of discussion last year, like, what does this language really accomplish? Because we are elected and there's nothing in the rules and procedures that really say, well, if you get this many unexcused, you're out of the council. So that's what I'm trying to understand. Like, what's the origin of this language and what it's trying to accomplish?
It wasn't any one place, Michelle. It came from a number of different places, and we put it together to try and make some sense out of it. And in some places we probably succeeded, and in others we didn't. I'm just curious, in that RSV example that you gave, were you in the end counted as unexcused?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
So you were unexcused, but you were at our meeting.
No, I was not at the meeting.
Oh, you
I
weren't?
gave a 3-day notification that I was in fact going to a pumpkin patch. So I was unexcused because I wasn't sick, but my son was feeling better and I was feeling better and the weather had changed. So we went to Busy Farms for the field trip. But I was
Ah.
unexcused because per the rules and procedures, I had to give a 5-day notification and I did not give a 5-day
Yeah,
notification.
and so in something like that, what we had talked about a year ago was that a judgment call would be the right way to go. And I don't know who made the judgment call there, but if it was the wrong one, I think that would be a matter of communication, from you to the chair and county manager.
Thank you for that example, Counselor Belcott. This whole area was one that I think we got too complicated, and I'd like to see it just simplified. I'm not sure at this point what this solves, what problem it may be. So I don't think there is a problem. I guess, and then there is, I don't have it right in front of me, but there is some language about, X number of unexcused absences, and you might forfeit your position on the council, I think is really, really an overreach. So I'd
Well,
like to see it simplified.
but we've been there. That's the problem. And we've been there in terms of a couple of counselors really being absent a lot for unknown reasons, for not communicating what they were. I mean, that sometimes in a rule like this, there is a series of happenings out of which it is born, and that's the case here. So that's why it is the way it is. That doesn't make it right, but that's why it's there.
Right. It just seems like it's been awkward for this. It just seems awkwardly implemented.
Well, and the other way it was questioned, well, are all of those ethics violations? Talk about awkward. I mean,
Yeah, and with,
that was a problem.
and with this council, it seems like we have quorum issues because all of us want to show up at the same place. It's the opposite.
So number one, it's all about communication. Let's just do the best we can. Number two, it's about accountability. And I would say this council, as it exists right now, has not had any problems at all. It's almost been overzealous and being everywhere at every time. But we did not experience that in the past, and that's what Karen was referring to. We had two counselors in particular that on a moment's notice would just disappear for weeks. We had one asked to reschedule our Wednesday meetings and refused to tell us why. When we didn't reschedule the Wednesday meetings, they just stopped coming. And there was nothing in the rules to give any kind of accountability to the public for that kind of behavior. So unfortunately, that's why the rules were put in place for accountability, which I think it's just communication as best you can. And again, we have a council now that's very diligent about attending to their responsibilities, but we didn't always have that. So is there a specific rule that we want to change or take a look at changing right now?
Me personally, the 5-day notification. I mean, since I've been on council, I've had COVID, pink eye, RSV, and some other disgusting things because I have little boys, and little boys, they get into things. I would be more than happy to come to council if you really want me to. But the 5 day thing, I've never personally worked anywhere where even, and if it's not a health emergency where you had to get a 5 day, because life is life and it's unpredictable. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how the rest of the council feels.
And
I thought there were two methods. There was being excused for 5 days, and then there was emergency as well. Like, yeah, extenuating circumstance.
Mhm. And that's where common sense comes into play too. When it's an emergency and, you know, you communicate with the chair and the county manager, it can be pretty clear that it is an
I mean, to
emergency.
me, it's like if I'm going to go to a Blazers game or something like that, I think I owe 5 days. I think that is perfectly fine. But if my child gets sick and I have to take him to the emergency room, that's a different story. So I think it's important that we have those separated. And from my understanding, we did. We do? Okay.
So let's move on if we can. If something comes to mind that you would like a specific change to the rules, then email and we'll consider it. But I think we can move on at this point.
okay, Counselor Belcott, let me know if you have any suggestions. I'd be more than happy to get that
I will.
typed up.
Thank you.
Okay, so under E is the amount of time a counselor speaks during council meetings.
I was the one who put this on the list. So let me just address it if I may. Most of the time, this isn't an issue, of course, but sometimes it is. And sometimes a counselor speaks too much, too long during a council meeting. And it just needs to be, in my opinion, curtailed. Now, we limit the public to 3 minutes. I don't know if you see it as appropriate to limit a counselor to 5 minutes or some other unknown number that would be determined. But I think that there should not be just unlimited time, which sometimes it feels like is the case.
Yeah, I don't see, go ahead.
Thank you.
Who-
I think, you know, maybe there's some topics, and there's a series of questions and answers and back and forth. I think it would be difficult to put a time limit on that. And I just think, you know, we're all duly elected and some issues are more important to some people and they would like to spend more time on those and other counselors might not be as interested in that. So it would seem like a long time that someone is speaking, but I think we should, it's important that you raise this, but I think maybe message received to all of us to be judicious in our language and how long we speak.
So, yeah, I would say I agree with Sue. We are elected officials, and I honestly, like I said before, I would never say that I've wasted my time listening to any counselor, even if I disagree with them. But I would say, I mean, I don't see any feasible way of implementing this. Are we going to have Kristen over there with a timer, making sure that we don't exceed 3 minutes? I mean, it's just unrealistic to be able to do anything like this.
And that's where I'm at too. I just don't see any feasible way to do this. You know, if you get a counselor that just starts ruminating or going off on their own stream of consciousness, I think it would be incumbent on the chair to reel them back in, as uncomfortable as that may be. And as Sue just said, let's just be all mindful of everyone else's time and try to stick to the exact topic that we're on, or at least very closely related to. and try to be as succinct as you can be. I just don't know how we can limit time. I think that would be pretty problematic. Even on the issue of fireworks, when we had so many people who wanted to comment and send in emails, it was hard to divvy it. Well, how are we going to do this fairly and get a chance for everyone to be heard, yet not hear the same thing over and over and over again? And we're in a different position because we're elected, and we should have substantive conversations, and we should be able to complete our thoughts. So again, I would be somewhat of a sergeant of arms since I sit in the chair right now. If I see someone going off on a tangent, I will reluctantly try to shorten their comments or bring them back to the topic at hand. But I don't know how we could put a time limitation on discussion.
Well, you've raised an important issue, which is when the person speaking branches out onto maybe related initially, maybe not related after a while, other issues that really expand the time involved and make it less valuable for the council being able to come to a decision on whatever is at hand. And by the way, who's your sergeant at arms, Chair? I'm kidding you. Michelle,
I will do
guess
my
that would
best.
be-
I want, every meeting that I'm ever in, I really try to encourage everyone's comments. So I don't want to encourage everyone's comments and then cut them off halfway through it because they've hit some kind of arbitrary time limit or they've had too much detail to talk about. So I think I'd rather not touch this one other than to say I will do my best if someone starts dominating a meeting or going off on tangents to try to be fair to give everyone equal time.
I will
Yeah,
share with you, and I probably will horrify some of you, but I will share with you that when I was chair, something that I just did automatically because I had done it in other positions that I was in, I would sometimes keep track of how much a person spoke. Not to share with anybody else, not to talk about it, nothing, but just to know. And it's pretty interesting. Sometimes an individual talks a long time about a particular agenda item. And it's not necessary.
so I would say I get it, but I also, this kind of concerns me, this discussion, because who is the person to determine what value somebody's input is? And I just don't think that there's a place for that in this board. I don't think there is. And so I would not favor any conditions or any judgment on whether something that a council brings up is worthy of discussion or not.
Well, that's a different matter yet, because that's not an objective measurable thing like time. So we hear you. I hear you.
I'm not hearing any consensus on limiting or trying to define how much time each counselor has to speak. Any further comments on this topic? Okay, I think we can move on.
We'll hop down to number 3. So these were, I just kind of categorized them based on the agenda items. So these ones didn't fit in the other 2 categories. So the first one is the number of times a counselor uses a reconsideration or amendment on a previous council decision. And there's no current language in the rules of procedure regarding this.
Well, this may have only happened once. So maybe we don't need any rule further defining it. Okay, I think we can move on. I don't
Okay.
hear any comments.
Okay, so we'll do no language there. The next one is process for selecting the council chair, and I think this was about probably something similar that you do at the Planning Commission, where councilors all had an opportunity to make a motion. I think that was the origination of this.
This was something that I brought up, and it was in looking at some of the small cities and how they, when they're selecting the chair, and I know Battleground in particular, it was open nominations. So open nominations could be made without the need for a second, and then each of the counselors had the opportunity to vote on a ballot. And I think it's a more positive way to go about this. So rather than voting potentially no on somebody, you're affirmatively voting yes on someone who has been nominated, and whoever gets the majority gets the position. But I just thought with the Battleground, the way that they did it was good.
I don't think that's even part of our bylaws, right? Isn't there a specific way to do it per our bylaws?
I don't know. That's a good question.
For selecting the chair. So I think the only thing it says about selecting the chair is it has to be done annually, and that's both in the charter and in the rules of procedure. I think Leslie's going to confirm that.
Good afternoon, Council. I am looking at the rules of procedure, and what it states is that at the first regular council meeting, the council will elect one of its members as chair and will also elect one of its members as vice chair. It doesn't state how that process occurs.
So I think the open nomination would, someone would not be trying to compete to hit the button as quickly as possible. It could be done in a calm, relaxed manner that everybody gets a chance to nominate whoever they think would be good. And the results may not be any different. I just think it's a bit more positive way to go about it.
So we've only done it twice, and each time I thought it was common. I didn't feel like our session last year, or actually, I guess we've done it 3 times. I guess I didn't perceive it the same way, so I didn't see any need to change it. Glenn, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I would like some clarification on the process that you're mentioning. So, I mean, eventually you will have to vote. So how does that work? I mean, there's open nominations, but how does the actual voting take place, or confirmation?
Well, in the Battleground example, each counselor wrote down who they were selecting, and then those were read, identifying who was voting which way.
I do
Some of
know
these
I'm sorry, Chair. I do know with Battleground and Ridgefield, that's with their mayor. They nominate their mayor, but that's the way that they're set up specifically. I don't think we're just set up the same way. That's why I asked Leslie about our bylaws.
And the comment I was going to make is some of these councils are much bigger than us, have a lot more people. I just don't see an issue. I think it complicates things more than anything. But what other comments do we have? Okay, well, Glenn, you had.
I was just going to say, I mean, it's worthy for more discussion, but I don't know when that would happen. Because I'm kind of curious about this too, because sometimes you are faced with the situation that, you don't want to vote no on somebody. So typically what ends up happening is the first person that's nominated is elected. I mean, I don't want it to be a contest for who opens their mouth first, you know? I'd be interested in looking at. I think it's worthy of looking at further, but I don't know at this point whether there's a better process than what we currently have or not. Just not convinced either way.
So I will interpret that as agreeing with Sue that you would like to look at it. Is there any third counselor that would also like to pursue a change? Okay, so at least at this time, I don't hear support from 3 counselors. What else?
All right, quorum. Currently, the rules of procedure says a quorum is 3 counselors, and then the question or suggestion that was made was reduce the number of votes to the majority of the quorum rather than 3 for action to be taken.
Good afternoon, Council. So I can address this because actually the charter also states, let me find the actual section. Section 2.2 of the charter, which talks about organization of the council, subsection E states that a majority of the council shall constitute a quorum at all meetings. And I read that to mean it's a majority of the council, so it's the majority of 5 rather than a majority of who is present at the meeting. So in line with the language of the charter and that the rules of procedure also confirm that, it appears that the majority of the council would be 3 counselors.
And that had always been the interpretation of the charter, that it takes 3 votes to take any action. That's the charter. The only exception to that is when it needs a supermajority, and then it defines that as 4 votes. For instance, agreeing to put something on the ballot as a charter amendment, that would take a supermajority. So I don't think we can change the charter requirement for 3 votes. I'm not sure who teed that one up, but.
Okay, we can move on to the next one then. Unless there's questions on that one. I mean, because the only way you can change a charter is to put it out for a ballot.
And I don't know if you made this public or made it known to all the others. If, you know, we had talked about putting things on a ballot over the years, whether it's a charter amendment or an advisory vote, like on fireworks. And in the past, the amounts have been pretty staggering, but only between like $30,000 or $60,000 to put something on the ballot. What we were just told, and we were always told too, that during a general election, it would be far less expensive to put a charter amendment on. I think the figure that we were just told was like $160,000. And so that's not an insignificant amount to put something on the ballot. If we were to try to ask for, hey, if we only have 3, we should only take 2 votes.
And that's approximate. And I did get confirmation, I'll send this to council as well, that if you put on more, the price is reduced for additional items, but it doesn't reduce that initial one.
Cheaper by the dozen, but still now a financial consideration. I'm pretty frugal, so I don't think I'll be such a zealot for putting things on the ballot. Are we done with that topic? Can we move on? Is there anyone that questions that? Okay, I think.
I believe this one has already been somewhat touched on, but it's process for boards and commission nominations. So from my perspective, we're making the process where you guys are in compliance with OPMA. So what we're doing is Michelle gets the applications, we send them to you. You can discuss the qualifications in executive session, but any motion to interview, appoint, or whatever has to be done in a public meeting. And that has worked in the last couple of appointments, but I think and it may have been worked through, but I think the original planning commission, not the one you just did, I think drew some questions on the process, but I don't have those specifics because I was not with council.
Further comments or questions on that?
Yeah, so just real quickly, and I think it's a process that works, but I don't know what everybody else would think, but the city of Vancouver has a substantially different process in this, and what they do is they have 2 subcommittees of counselors. So in our case, that would be, we got 5, so it'd be 2 and 2. Or you could go 3 and 3 with one, like a chair being crossover or something.
That's a quorum, though, so
Oh,
that's
right, yeah, so it can't be 3, that's right. But basically, there's a subcommittee, 2 subcommittees, and they would alternate turns in the planning commission process, appointment process. Ultimately, that quorum, or not quorum, but that subcommittee will meet and determine who they want to interview, will go through the interview process and submit a recommendation that comes forward to the council as a whole. Now, what that would do is eliminate the need for an executive session because it would not be a quorum at that point. It would be just a little bit more private interview process. So just because there would be 2 counselors only that would be interviewing and working with the candidates. The process that we have right now is very clunky, to say the least, confusing. This is a little bit cleaner, but it comes also at the cost of one person wouldn't be participating. And in the case of the city of Vancouver, it's the mayor. So in our situation, it would probably be the chair that would not be on any subcommittee. So that's kind of what I would consider a downside to it. But it would highly simplify the process, make it much quicker and more efficient, in my opinion. I don't know what the thoughts are of the rest of the council.
That's based on their charter though, right? Like their bylaws, I mean, which are different from ours because we're the county and they're the city.
I don't know how whether it's their charter or what, but at this point, it's up to us. We have the ability to decide how we want to do our process. Not saying it has to be like there, I'm just offering it as a second opportunity.
Yeah, it just, to me, that's, and I don't know, I'm not the expert, this would be a Leslie question. It just sounds like a charter revision. I don't know though.
Yeah, I believe the charter just simply says which commission that the council approves. It doesn't talk about the process to get to that approval.
That's correct.
Chair,
Yeah, go ahead.
thank you. Yeah, I think some of the concerns that were raised, in my mind, that it related to the executive session, but I think more so it was qualifications and assuring that the people who were most qualified had an opportunity to be interviewed. And I'd like to learn more about the City of Vancouver's process, because it's a little confusing. No fault of yours, Councillor Young, but I'd like to understand that a little bit better because I don't know if that's the right way to go. But I do think that what I didn't feel like of those 26 applicants, there was enough deliberation on each one of them and who to bring forward related to their qualifications, or really us understanding for each of us individually what qualifications we thought were the most important. So I think just as a review process, it would be good for the public to understand what qualifications are we looking for, and then each counselor can rate the applicants related to those qualifications. It would provide, as much as you're able to in these kinds of situations, some quantification of weighing of an applicant's qualifications. And because I do think there were several who were highly qualified that we didn't have an opportunity to interview just the way the process was set up.
So one comment I want to make, because I've heard 2 different things from 2 different counselors on why we have executive session. And I would offer a third review of this from all the different personal boards I've sat on in different variety, whether it was as a deputy district attorney, helping pick a chief or hire someone, or as a judge, we hired some civilian staff, and then as a commander, we had civilian staff and made lots of personnel decisions on promotions and selections for commands and things like that. Almost every single one of them had an executive session. It had nothing to do with quorum. It had to do with the ability to openly discuss pros and cons. And how awful, I know everyone's strong and everyone had a good resume, but how awful would it be to speak in public about someone's resume and list all the cons about why we don't like their resume? You know, there's a real reason that everyone uses an executive kind of style discussion process. And so as to what Sue just brought up, you know, we do that with contracts, with grants. You know, we have sometimes complicated rating criteria, and they're uniform for each packet that we receive, and they get scored. And then, this, you know, it's more quantifiable in different ways. I don't support doing that for boards and commissions for the very few that we pick. Some are easier than others, and we have library selections sometimes. We have mosquito board selections, solid waste. I don't know the entire list that we go through, but I'd rather not see something that we try to consolidate down to a mathematical formula that becomes so much more complicated, nor do I want to give up my vote to a subcommittee to do the initial evaluation. Anyway, I don't support changing it, but go ahead, who else is speaking up?
Counselor Belcott, when you were mentioning basically picking people's resumes apart or saying negative things about them in public, my initial concern, which I think I shared with all of you, was also disclosing people's personal information as well. I think that would maybe give people maybe consider not applying for our positions because of that. I wasn't comfortable with disclosing people's personal information, and I think that you could potentially do that if you're talking about their history in public because it's personal information. So that was my concern.
Just to follow up, to be clear on what I'm suggesting, Councillor Young and I are suggesting two different things. What I'm suggesting is that the public have an opportunity to understand what the council is weighing when they're selecting someone to serve on the planning commission in particular, and especially as we're going into comp plan update, that there's clarity about that, and we're not just making decisions based on for any political reasons or somebody feels one particular way, so that there's an openness and understanding of how we're judging those folks. I would want the chair to be involved with that process, and I am not suggesting eliminating an executive session because I think there does need to be a candid discussion about the candidates, nor am I suggesting revealing personal information. And you know, we had one candidate who was very concerned about that. So I'm not saying eliminate the executive session. I'm just saying let's be upfront, maybe even before the applications arrive, about what kind of criteria we think would make for the best planning commission member.
Okay, any other comments? I would just add that just the job description puts out in the public what we're looking for, and that is it. And contrary to what you may be implying here, there may be political implications. Maybe someone is really an activist and really politically engaged, and you don't want them answering to a nonpartisan community. So sometimes, I mean, there's a limitless number of factors that would go into someone's strengths and weaknesses, and you couldn't define them all. But we haven't heard from Karen. Karen, do you have anything you wanted to add?
No, it's interesting. I think the questions that we ask all of the candidates in a structured interview really reveals the topic areas that we are evaluating, and probably better than stating in some way what they are. And I don't know, I think that's enough.
Okay, is there anyone interested in changing that process? Other than, I take it that Sue and Glenn do, even though they are proposing two different things. Okay, once again, I'm not hearing a third vote or even a second on either one of the two very different proposals.
Chair, just real quick, so this, I mean, the way we did it this time was a little bit different than we did the last time. So what I would be interested in is maybe kind of not, writing down the actual policy so it's clear. And plus it happens once a year and we kind of forget that process. So if we could just have it written down, I think that would be productive.
And would you like that in the rules of procedure, or like we write down business processes so that we can ensure we're following the same process, or do you care?
So I think that is a good point, and it did kind of morph during my time period too, because I think we may have been brushing up because the PA got involved and said, hey, this doesn't look so good when you're sending an email on nominations to an assistant, and then we tally up, the assistant would tally up, well, who got 3 votes, who didn't, and that would constitute the nomination. So things morphed as we cleaned up or tightened up our processes. So I think it should be a rule of procedure, but I mean, what's the recommendation from the PA on that? Where's the process best found?
It's a good question. I'm not sure that it's really a legal question. I mean, you could have it, either way, it would be available to the public, whether it's a business process that is kept with the county manager's office or in the rules of procedure. Either way, just as long as it's clear, if anyone asked for it, they would get a copy of it.
So it sounds like the rules are, go ahead.
I would just say I would support developing a consistent process for selecting planning commission members.
Okay, so I can do it both ways. I can draft something that you can see what it would look like in your rules of procedure, and I can do a separate business process, and then you guys can determine it where you want that. So,
Super.
I heard 3.
Okay. Boy, Karen, did you have something?
Yes, would it smartly be for just planning commission selections, or would it be for board and commission nominations in general?
Yeah.
I would say
it would be for all. Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
That sounds good.
I support that too. And I would say we're
Okay,
involved in this process more than just once a year, depending on if someone moves or resigns. So it could happen, because I think with this particular commission, we did this in less than a year before, because we were, so that would be good.
Okay, does that conclude?
We have one more, unless any other counselor has stuff to bring up that's not on this list. But the last one that was brought forward was the amount of time staff is spent supporting counselors.
Is that exclusive of the county manager's time?
I didn't ask.
Right, who wants to speak on this? Because
Well, we addressed this a while back, and I kind of feel like what we did seems to be working, but I don't know exactly. I mean, I'm not the staff, so I don't know how much time each counselor is spending with them. But, our process basically was that you get a little bit of time you know, and then staff will kind of make that judgment when it needs to come towards the council as a whole to be ratified to continue to work on something, but I don't necessarily see a problem unless I'm unaware of some things that are taking place.
I suspect that counselors would not be the ones to see a problem, because one or two or three of us might actually be causing a problem. So how to find out whether there is discrepancy, maybe sometimes even wide discrepancy in the demands that are made on staff time, I think is a part of the picture. And how to get to that is a question that I don't know the answer to. But if there is a wide discrepancy, that's kind of a problem, because there should be a broad range of involvement of the staff with the counselors. And I know that personally, I feel supported completely by staff. I don't know if all of the counselors do. I know that I've heard complaints about that from some counselors. So I suspect that they don't. So I think it's an area for attention, but exactly how to go at it is a question that I don't know the answer to. Maybe staff has ideas sometimes of how to do it, but
So I'm kind of coming at this from where Councilor Young just came up. I thought we dealt with this. I thought it was behind us. I thought things were working well. I haven't heard anything different. And
I think
where you characterize, you know, if you have one counselor or two counselors dominating all the staff time, you characterize that as a problem. Someone may characterize that as, wow, those two are really kicking butt. They are really working hard. Maybe the others should spend more time tasking staff. You know, I think there's different ways of looking at this. But Kathleen, you were going to add something?
No, the only thing I was going to clarify with Councilor Young's process he talked about, I think that was with our policy analyst when he started, just to ensure, which I think is not an issue because he is sharing everything he's working on with council every week. So I agree, I don't think that's an issue. At least I haven't heard of that being an issue. So.
And that's the only one I knew about. And I did talk to him and say, geez, is this an issue? And he goes, no, I don't think so. So what staff time are we talking about? I mean, we are not allowed to task staff, period. We can send issues to the manager or send questions to the manager and to a particular staff member, but we're prohibited by the charter from tasking them to telling them to do something. So I'm not even sure what we're talking about here.
well, let's say that I'm just going to make something up. Let's say that there was a problem in one counselor's mind on codes. And the feeling of that counselor was that staff didn't spend enough time pursuing the resolution of whatever the code problem was for them or from their perspective. So that might be an example of one.
So I think this is, I don't know that we can put a parameter on this. And this is where you look at the charter and the system of government that we have in the county, and nothing's ever perfect. And so the way I look at this personally is that, you know, we as council members, it's in the charter that we can ask, that we can request for information. Anything above that is really at the purview of the county manager. And so I understand there's that difficulty, though. I mean, I'm sure there's pressure on the county manager not to say no to a counselor. And so there's that balance where we just kind of have to all find, and if there's a problem, then we got to talk it out you know, figure out where that balance lies. But yeah, I mean, I feel that this like really, aside from maybe Jordan, you know, and looking at his time specifically, I think this is in the purview of the county manager to determine how much assistance that staff provides on whatever the issue might be.
Chair?
Please go ahead, Sue.
Thank you. Well, and there's also the support staff that support each of the counselors, Kristen and Michelle and Rebecca. And so I don't know if there's been a problem with one counselor or another demanding more of their time, but I just tossed that out there for consideration.
Yeah, so I still don't understand the issue. Is that the issue, is with the support staff? Like we're asking for too many things being printed? I mean, what's this about?
I can't answer that about the support staff. I mean, I can certainly share my insights on what comes through me, and possibly Kristen because she deals with it, but, you know, it is a significant amount of time, and some counselors take a lot more time than others, you know, so when, you know, like if I look at my week, got one-on-ones with council all day Monday, that's my whole day. Tuesday, we got council meeting, Wednesday, council time. The next 2 days, I'm responding to counselors. You know, and so we are trying to figure out systems in our office because that's not, I mean, we're here to support you and we want to make sure, but I also have a function of, we got to lead this county and we got to provide that oversight, and Amber's provided some relief valves. So it's a balancing act right now, and we're trying to, internally trying to figure out the best path forward to make sure you don't have a reduction in any support at all. But I mean, there are, at times, counselors will take my entire week outside of council meetings, which then I'm here or working weird hours trying to get stuff done. So that's all. But that, I mean, that's just part of management and leadership, and we do the best that we can. And last year, I know it was especially tough, and we're getting the numbers because the amount of staff reports and everything that came before council broke records. We've never done that much work. And part of it was things got paused and COVID because the state made us pause things, and so catching up and doing our normal business. So, but yeah, I mean, and I'll tell you, the girls, they are crossing over, adding council meetings. They're doing this meeting at the same time they're getting stuff for next week, and so, you know, so we're constantly overlapping, and you know, but that's part of what we do.
So what I would like is to see a recommendation from you on this, on how this can be fixed. I think there's probably a lot of stuff that we as counselors, a lot of your time that we're consuming that probably could be designated elsewhere. I don't know, but I would be interested in, it sounds like there is an issue, so I would be interested in hearing what you would suggest on how we fix that.
Yeah, so based on what you just said, to me, this is a charter issue because we don't have any staff. We have no support. We don't have a drafting section. We don't have a finance team. You know, hey, look in the budget for this. We want to find 5% savings. Or, hey, let's draft, what's the deal on this code? Let's draft it. Everything comes from the executive, all of it. And so we have no place else to go to ask, because all of it for us is, where's the policy decision going to be? Does this code need fixing? Do we need to eliminate code? Do we need to create code? And we don't have any staff to do it ourselves. There's nothing resident with the council other than the support we get from the executive branch.
Right,
That's a
but we
charter.
do, yeah, but we do have, Jordan has been a huge relief valve for me because, I mean, if you guys remember, 6 months last year, I had no HR director and we had to have a policy analyst. So that was me with some staff. But we do have staff in the county, a finance team, code or comm dev, that are willing to help support those policies. So I'm not writing all of your guys' code, right? We have a good team here that steps up to help out. So it's, yeah. So I just wanted to put that out there because we have a lot of good staff that get us through this.
Yeah, and not using this term out of disrespect because it's not really accurate, but I would prefer to see the county manager managing the county, not babysitting the council, if you will. And it's not, again, no disrespect, she's not babysitting us, but answering all of our questions that we have, which I think are valid and should be answered in one way or another. But I would like to see less of that process being on your shoulder, if there's a possible way to do that.
So does the council want to see any data related to that, or just have me, because we're going to figure it out. So I'm not worried, but I can easily say how many emails I get from each counselor a week, because that does provide a lot, or even adding on the follow-up items from our one-on-ones and stuff, so that the whole council can see, wow, there's 40 emails coming from this person every day versus this one's doing one. I don't know if that's helpful for the council at all. I do think, working with my leadership team and the staff in the office, we will find ways to continue to get things done.
I think that would be very helpful for me, Kathleen, because it would help me to understand when there are complaints about staff not doing enough for the council or for a particular counselor. It would help me understand the context of that situation. And yeah, I think any kind of data other than that comes to mind, yeah, I think I'd be interested, and maybe some of the rest of you would too.
Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I would be interested as well. Maybe that could be shared on one-on-ones when we meet together. I know for me, I think mostly my requests are in response to constituents and not knowing how to remedy something, and not wanting to contact directly any department head, and including you in that. So if there's ways that we can streamline things, I'm all in on that.
Any objection to that? Because I think this is furthering the charter and how to figure out how the council gets the supports it needs while working and allowing the executive to do its job in running the government every day. So enough discussion, or any other points?
The only thing I would add is that if a counselor has concern about services or support, please tell me. I can't help if I don't know. So if there is, and I know we have really good open dialogue in our one-on-ones, but, I need to know so that we can help address that. Okay.
So I will say it, since you just asked it. We have all of our legal support comes from the PA, which is a separate elected official. And so we need to work on that streamlining too, for responsiveness on across the board, whether it's contract evaluation, any legal research we need timely responses, and we get all that support. We don't, if for the public, if they're listening, most counties have their own lawyers. They have their own general counsel's office, not counselors, but lawyers that work just for the Board of Supervisors, freeholders, whatever they're called in different counties around the country. They have their own legal support. We don't have that in Washington State. It's a very unusual arrangement. So it is sometimes frustrating to wait on issues. And one I will point out right away, Comcast contract still not signed. It's like 2 years.
Not on us though, right now.
Okay, it's not on that, it's on them right now.
I want to make that clear. We used the contract that they gave us, and now they're changing some of that language.
Okay, well, hopefully they don't back out, but then we can repurpose that ARPA money. Anyway, these are all things that the general public doesn't know about how the government works, and some friction points, and however we can make them more efficient is better for all of us. Go ahead, Leslie.
Thank you, Chair Medvedine. I just wanted to tell you and the rest of the council that if there are any instances where you feel as though there's a delay with information coming from the PA's office, please contact me. I'm in charge of the civil department, and I'm happy to check in with the deputies that work there. I will say, you know, they're busy like everybody else, but certainly, you know, we can look into that. If there is an issue, by all means, please contact me. I'd be happy to discuss with you. Thank you.
Anything
That
further?
is all that I have. I don't know if other counselors or any counselor has any other questions or clarifications for the rules of procedure.
Just
Anything
to
further,
note
Brian?
that it appears that one of the attendees has her hand up.
What's that?
I didn't get that, Karen, I'm sorry.
Whoops, it appeared, let me see if it's changed now. It has changed.
Participants.
One of the participants had her hand up. It is not up now. Ignore what I said.
Okay. Okay, so I don't think we have anything left for,
No,
This
I'll
year's
bring,
retreat.
I'll hopefully get these edits out, a draft very soon, and then we will not talk about it next week because I think it's important that all of our counselors can be there. So it'll be the following week. I'll put it on council time for the first review, but you'll have it more than a week ahead of time.
okay, without further ado, we'll go ahead and adjourn our retreat.